Coogs house. Vacation's over. Football is back at the end of this month, and I don't think the nation is quite ready for just how many games the Houston Cougars are going to win starting this month.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. As the everydayer that you are, you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below as you're getting in the mood for football, your favorite football-themed movie. I'm a sucker for Remember the Titans. Tell us comments down. The dish is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. Best place to get last minute tickets, the lowest prices, guaranteed. We've got more on that from later. I want to start off with these win totals by another buddy of ours over at FanDuel. We'll talk about them later. But win totals and what people are not seeing with the Houston Cougar win total. Like, you should frankly go get some money on that right now. Second segment, I do want to talk about some of these games being potentially trickier games in the schedule. I don't want to act like there's just nothing out there that can go wrong. Last but not least, while we're talking about the schedule, and it is still early August 4th, I guess, when this comes out, but you can get a ticket to one of these games. I'm talking about a couple of road trips that if I just could drop money on road trips, I would be looking to take as well. But first, let's get started. FanDuel has set the win total for the Houston Cougars as of the recording of this podcast at 5.5. That means that they expect Houston to be bet, around that 5 or 6 win. They, anticipate half the bets being above 5.5 games and half the bets being below 5.5 games. I think that's comically low, like comically low. And listen, FanDuel does some great stuff. This is really me telling you to go make some money on that one over at FanDuel, because right now FanDuel has Houston at 5.5 wins, which would put them in the bottom, I'll say, third of the conference. I will say one thing interesting about, looking across the entirety as we're recording this podcast of the Big 12 is no one's at more than 8.5 wins. No one's lower than 5.5 wins. It's kind of a very middle of the road. Like, a lot of teams are going to beat up on one another. I don't understand why Houston's win total is that low, given their schedule this year being so much less challenging than it was a year ago. You're playing your first true FCS opponent in Stephen F. Austin to start the season since 2019, the Houston Cougars. I think that's a win you can check off. You play Rice in week 2, their team you blew the doors off of last year, and one of the only teams you blew the doors off of last year. And listen, I know Houston went 4-8 and 4-8 the last 2 seasons, but I just kind of chalked in a couple of wins that if Houston does their job, they should get. And so, given those past seasons are in the past, this is a present tense operation. Houston should have 2 wins coming out the schedule. First 2 weeks, Stephen F. Austin, August 28th, Thursday night. Go get it. At Rice, air quotes, at Rice, down the street in the city of Houston. Go get that one done as well. You come back and you host Colorado in week 3. The week 0 thing was throwing me off. That is week 3, September 12th. That's a Friday night at the University of Houston. You're coming off of a Rice game yourself. I think that should be a game that Houston should feel pretty confident about, especially when you look at that in the win totals. FanDuel themselves have Colorado as in the same class, down in the same bottom of the conference at 5.5 wins at their over-under at the time of recording. Then you get a bye week. You head to Oregon State. And while it's a road trip, you get a bye week before it. Oregon State themselves has 6.5 wins on the over-under at FanDuel. They play 5 Group of 5 games. Their Power 4 games include games with Wake and Cal, and they have a home-and-home with Wazoo. Yes, Washington State in that Pac-12/2. And I feel like that's another game Houston could win. We could very realistically be talking at the end of the game on September 26th, which is a West Coast late night game. We could very easily be talking about Houston being 4 And now I'm not guaranteeing things. I'm not saying it's a guarantee gonna happen, but that's 4 wins theoretically, and a very possible 4 wins out of this 5.5. We're already almost there, right? And I think there's other things about the Houston Cougars schedule as you look at it. You're scheduled to play all 5 of the other teams that FanDuel predicts to have around 5.5 wins. You play Colorado, you play Arizona, you play Arizona at home for what it's worth. Play Colorado at home for what it's worth. You do have to go to UCF and all that, but you get to host a West Virginia team in early November under a new coach of their own. I just see so much of this as being kind of ludicrous. Honestly, I just listen. I think that those are all good things, but perhaps more importantly for my confidence in Houston breaking this 5.5 win total is they only play of the teams. There are, let me make sure I get this number correct. There are 7 teams, if I'm counting my math correctly, that have a over under of 7.5 or higher. That's I mean, there are 3 at 8.5, and then another 4 at 7.5. Of those 7 teams, you only play of 3 of them: Texas Tech on the 4th of October, Arizona State on the 25th, and Baylor on the 29th. You don't have to play in Houston Cougars schedule with Kansas State or with Iowa State or with Kansas and Utah that other people are higher on than I am. Suddenly, I don't see you get to miss those ones. Of those games we mentioned, Tech, Arizona State, and Baylor, you get Tech at home. Baylor's not that far. Frankly, I've talked with Cam a little bit about this via text message, but I feel like there's a world where Baylor's resting starters at the end of the season because they've got a chance to play in the Big 12 championship game and don't get hurt. I just feel like suddenly you're looking at something like, wait a second, this team can't win 5 games. Like that doesn't 6 games feels like a very easy threshold for this team right now. And listen, you got buys before you play Oklahoma State, or for Oregon State, I'm sorry, on September 26th. You got a bye the week before that. And you have a bye the week before TCU on November 22nd. While there's only 2 regular season games after that last bye, they do kind of split the season into nice, sizable chunks. I think that late bye is going to be really important for kind of healing up for what could be 2 really important games. Last year, Houston was 4-6 going down the stretch. They had 2 games that could have won that would have put them into bowl contention. Obviously, they dropped those 2 the final couple weeks of the season. But this year, you have a bye to kind of reset, readjust, and get ready for those. That bye comes after hosting West Virginia and then going to Central Florida. And honestly, I think those are 2 games you should be looking at potentially winning. And furthermore, I think that Central Florida's biggest attribute in having to win at their place is that it's a tough place to play. I think neutral field, Houston's a better roster right now. Like, frankly, given the struggles Frost has had in his last couple stops, the coaching staff at Houston's in a better spot as well. I, I know I'm classically the optimist, and I always get the comments down below about how Parker's just not seeing the whole picture, or Parker. But I see this 5.5 win total. And I see where the teams Houston plays are on this win total. I'm like, how can you only think Houston's going to win 5 or 6 of those games? I I, I can check 4 off right now. I just don't get it. And I frankly don't get it when you factor in like Houston's roster turned over a lot in the right direction. They got a lot of really, yes, they lost a couple talented DBs, whatever. They added DBs as well. They added great receivers. They added a great quarterback. They added starting caliber offensive linemen. They returned a couple of starting caliber offensive linemen as well. Like I just like the 2 bright spots in last year's offensive line. It's a 5-person position. 5 fingers make a fist. I get it. They returned 2 of those 5. I just feel like 5.5 is so low for this team in this schedule that I feel like you should go make some money at FanDuel on it because I don't see why they're doing that. Now, We'll talk more on there are some tricky games in this. I want to get into those in a second. Before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at 5 Hour Energy. Now it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings bold grape, ginger, and lime flavors to flavor your favorite golf drink. Might as well get into a quick, energizing shot with your sinking birdies or just making memories with friends. This one's a hole in one for your energy game. Let's be honest, sometimes the golf course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know between teaching, coaching, podcasting, toddler, what all the different things, I certainly need it when I go on I need all the help I can on the golf course. Let's just be really honest here. Energy can't be something I'm lacking. 5 Hour Energy helps me make sure I'm on top of my game. If you head to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code Locked On Golf. You heard that right, Locked On Golf, to receive 20% off of your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. It cannot be used on other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders, whether meeting with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36. Get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Parker Andrews, Locked On Coogs here. And listen, I am looking at the Houston Cougar football schedule, going through things. I will point out that I do think there are some tricky, trappy, problematic kind of things in the schedule. And I don't want to sound all peachy and roses like I did in the first segment. I do think Houston's going to win 6 games or more. I don't think that's a question mark here. But I don't want to act like college football won't college football. This football season, there will be some undefeated team that loses the game they should not. I can guarantee that happens in college football. It seems to happen every single year. There will be some team that loses to an unranked team that shouldn't. That happens every single year in college football. There will be a team that loses to a group of 5 team that shouldn't. There'll be all those kinds of madhouse chaotic things, and the Vegas favorites probably don't win the whole thing. That's just the way things go typically in college football. It is one of the things that makes the sport so great, honestly. Like, that's what makes it such an entertaining thing to watch. I think Houston can play on both sides of that, frankly, this season. Last season, they beat Kansas State and kind of turned their season upside down in a way that played the spoiler. Right, David took down Goliath in a lot of people's eyes there. Kansas State was careening towards a Big 12 title game. Houston flipped them upside down, right? Last season, I would point out that Houston also, I think Utah had some injuries and what's kind of more realistic about the time they got there, but beat a team in Utah that before the season no one would have thought they'd beat either. Year before, Houston was on the wrong side of those kinds of games against teams like Rice in Dana Holgerson's final year at the program, ultimately ended his tenure, right? And so these things happen across college football. I think one of the things that makes this season tricky for Houston is that 4 of their 12 games do not happen on a Saturday. Now they open with Sam Houston with not Sam Houston, open with Stephen F. Austin on a Thursday night. Obviously, the opener, you can schedule your week how you want to. And yes, they have a bye week before Oregon State. And so that also helps with the scheduling. But you go from like hosting West Virginia on November 1st to a short week Friday night game on the road in Orlando, November 7th against Central Florida, right? Generally speaking, and Willie Fritz and staff will adjust. I have faith that they will, but football is a super routine, regimented kind of week, right? You play on Saturday, you recover and watch film on Sunday, you go through walkthroughs and stretch your body out and get kind of limber on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, hard practice, Thursday, dial it down on the physicality a bit, kind of sharpen the mental side of it. Friday, you're walking through and doing things in t-shirts and shorts because Saturday, you got to be full go. That's the routine. Throwing wrenches in that by playing on Fridays can cause problems. And I don't mean to say that they won't be prepared for those. They've known about these schedules for a while now. But I do think I'm going to see how it plays out. I can see it typing away right now. I understand that it's the same problem for them as it is for Houston, I just feel like it'll be interesting to see who those impact more, on top of other things that can go wrong in a football game as well. So those, I think, set aside are all going. I qualify any non-traditional game day a tricky thing. I would say the same about playing on a Thursday night in the NFL or whatever, back to back in the NBA, those kind of things, right? Um, that short week against Colorado, I also think early in the season for Houston is going to be interesting because Houston, while they don't have to travel to Rice, is coming off of a Rice game. Houston plays Stephen F. Austin and Rice. And I think you'll be feeling pretty good about the Houston Cougars at that point. Certainly going to be feeling one of two directions, I guess, about them. We'll see. We'll be talking about it when it happens. But Colorado has a pair of quarterbacks, Caden Salter and Julian Lewis. Caden Salter's big time transfer, Julian Lewis, big time recruit. And they played Georgia Tech in the opening game. And I wonder if by the end of that game, they'll make a real decision as to who the quarterback of the program this year will be. They sent both to Big 12 Media Days. It sounds like they're going to try and play both as long as they can, but they played Georgia Tech to open. ACC team, we saw them almost beat Georgia yet last year, right? Then Colorado plays Delaware. And I'm going to be honest, if they had picked their quarterback in the Georgia Tech game by the end of it, say, hey, we feel so much better about this guy than that guy, and they're going to go with this guy. They probably don't need to play this guy or even start this guy to beat Delaware. They just probably can just continue to go about business as business is in that game. And so you're going to be spending your week on a short week with Colorado preparing for two quarterbacks, but they might only play one. And that one gets a full week of practice where you only spent half of your week getting ready for that one. Right. And I think that could lead you to a short week as well, Friday night game, a tricky scenario here. And I, again, I trust what Fritz does. I think Fritz is a better coach than Prime. And I think part of that's just because Prime hasn't been doing this quite as long. Right. But I feel like that is honestly, that is a big time advantage for Colorado because they'll know what cards they've got dealt to them, and Houston is going to be kind of playing guessing games with that. Now, I also think that if you follow the schedule as it goes, Houston plays at Arizona State on October 25th, and then a week later is Saturday. A week later, play host West Virginia. I think there are big chances for letdowns from positive or negative results out in Arizona to come back from a late game Saturday and then have to gear up to play a West Virginia team, right? And not be looking down the road a little bit or not be let down for what happened in Arizona State because they're projected to be really good or whatever. I think that's a tricky one as well. And then afterwards, I already mentioned it, but you have a short week between hosting West Virginia and heading to Orlando and Central Florida. And look, regardless of how hard or hard a team they are, how good a team they are, whatever Central Florida is, I do think that the bounce house is a tough road trip. I think a Friday night game for them is a bigger deal than it is for a lot of other programs. I also think what's worth it, whatever kind of season they're having with Scott Frost in his first year back, they're probably going to be pitching it to their student body and fans as this is a team we can beat. I have I think neutral site, all that kind of stuff. Houston's a better program, but this is at their place on a Friday night. Um, they'll be doing something for space uniforms, I'm sure, because they tend to do that with Houston when Houston comes to town and all of that. And frankly, if it's anything like the last time Houston played West Virginia the week before, you have an exciting game, crazy finish or whatever against West Virginia. You beat West Virginia. Hoorah, hoorah. You're feeling good about it. You got to turn around and get on a plane the next Thursday because you got to play in Orlando the next Friday, right? I just feel like that is trickier than people are leading on to be. And so that's a couple games I think that Houston's, just tricky. Obviously, like I think Texas Tech is going to be a tough game because I think they're talented, and I think that Arizona State's going to be a tough game because you're on the road and they're talented. And I think if Baylor is playing for a spot in the Big 12 championship game at the end of the season, they have a really good quarterback. I get those things being tough as well for different reasons, but from a trickiness perspective, like more challenging in actuality than it would be in a neutral site, neutral everything kind of situation. I could see a couple of those being tricky. Now, I don't think that it adds up to enough games to hurt my win-loss record. I still think that they'll be easily over that 5.5. But anyway, that's not important right now. What is important is when you win all this money because you say Houston's going to win over 5.5, because that's what I would do if I had that kind of advice. I think you should take a road trip and go see these Houston Cougars play this season. I got 2 road trips that you need to go take. But before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. We've all been there. Logging in early, waiting for concert tickets to go on sale. You lose your spot for the show you've been dying to see. And live music should be about making memories and not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping or shopping any kind, really. Just get to the event. And that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting into concerts and faster and easier. Prices actually drop as you get closer to showtime. You can save over 60% off with like killer last minute deals. I love in the app, you find the toggle, you flip it over to where all the prices are included. You can check out the seat view from that row and section for that type of event in that type of venue. You know what you're getting into, you know exactly what you're paying. I know all the information up front. You can take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to apply again. Create an account, redeem code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last year tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Partners, Locked On Coogs here. And listen, it is still early August. It is football season. It's here, but it's not quite here. You got time to get tickets through Game Time or whatever you want to do, and you can get to these games in person. Now, Houston's lucky in that of their 6 road games, one of them is just down the street to Rice. So you only really have 5 opportunities to make a road trip or make a real trip out of getting to go watch the Houston Cougars play. One of them is to Baylor and Waco. And while I could talk about where you find barbecue in Central Texas, and I don't know that Waco's the town I stop in, but it's certainly close to some towns I might stop in or whatever. Waco's old news. Everyone in Texas has been in Waco. Chip and Joanne, that whole thing. Don't go to the compound outside of town. Like those kinds of things in Waco exist, right? Central Florida for Houston too. Orlando is Disney World and fun, and I'm sure the people in the comment section tell me about other things in Orlando. But truthfully, Houston and UCF have been in the same conference for a while now, and you probably, if you travel with a team often, try to go watch them play often, you've probably been to Orlando. If you have a summer vacation with a child, you might have been to Disney. If you have the means to get there, you might have been to Disney World, right? That happens. Look, I tried to make a similar kind of statement about Stillwater, and I can't figure out what to sell in Stillwater. There's a burger joint, Cody of Locked On Oklahoma State tells me, and I trust him on it, and that's Oklahoma State. But I think the other 2 road trips are ones you should make. I'm going to make the case for why you should do that. Now, I want to talk first about, I guess, the easier football sell, and that is Arizona State. Now, Arizona State's a game that the Big 12 is trying to play up. Houston, Arizona State play on a Saturday. That Friday night in Phoenix, Tempe area, they're going to do a big WWE Big 12 deal there. So if you want to go, you can get there early and take that in. They're not doing that very many times across the conference. Kind of puts the game on display. So you want to go check that one out for sure. And I also think that it's important to mention that if Houston wins that game, as we're sitting here in August talking about it, that would be the biggest upset on the schedule, like bar none. People are running away with Arizona State to repeat, and I think some of that's a little bit lazy analysis, but whatever. I think that there's a lot of talent returning to Arizona State, so we were excited about that one. Going out there and beating them at their place would be the upset in the conference, bar none. Bigger to me than beating Kansas State in Houston a year ago. Just full stop. I think it'd be a bigger, more resonant win through the conference if things stand as they are today and everyone's healthy and all that than beating Kansas State was for Houston a year ago. I think that's the kind of thing that is worth making a trip to go see if you have the means to do it. Right. I would also point out it's a new venue to go see. Phoenix is supposed to be lovely. And it's also, as you're looking at it, you'll be heading out there in late October where it's not quite 127 degrees or whatever stupid stuff it is in the desert. It'd be a much more manageable trip from that perspective. I also think for what it's worth, you're like the closest of any conference venue to the Grand Canyon. You're not close. You got a couple hour drive, but like you are close-ish if you want to make a couple day trip out of it and do that, like make that your big trek on Sunday and then come home on Monday or whatever. Like you can do all of those things. That probably make 2 more days than that, but you feel me on that, right? You can figure that out. I think that there are interesting things to go do out there. I also think for what it's worth that while I guess you could have been maybe out to Arizona and Tucson last year. Tucson and Tempe or Tucson and Phoenix are very different places. Phoenix has some big city amenities and fun. If you're a golfer, Arizona's good for that too, right? You can go out and find that kind of stuff too. So I get that trip. The other trip though, the trip I really like, if I had the means to make one legitimate road trip this season, I think I'd be making it, is out to Corvallis, Oregon, see Houston and Oregon State. Now, in Corvallis itself, you're like 90 minutes south of Portland. You're 45 minutes north of Eugene. I'm looking at the map here. Looks like you're about 45 minutes west of the ocean as well. So if you wanted to get to those, you quickly could for the day that you're not at the game, right? I'd imagine you probably fly into Eugene or Portland, probably more likely Portland, and make the drive. But either way, I could see how those are attractions themselves. I think Corvallis, though, is in this heart of Oregon, as I'm looking at maps of things to do here, where you truly have like the hiking, outdoorsy, trailsy kind of crowd. If you're a mountain biker or just a hiker and you want to go see that, that's the place to do it. It's beautiful. It's got all that kind of appeal. It's getting out of the heat. You're getting there in September 26th, the game. So, like, you'd be theoretically getting up to Corvallis, Oregon, admittedly on a Friday, but out of Texas September heat into Oregon September. I mean, the average temperature looks like online there is like in the 60s. Like that's awesome. Like that sounds so much better than what's happening in Texas these days, right? Um, if you're a brewery person, you're kind of just after what looks like something called September Fest and right before Blocktober for the Block 15 brewery. But truthfully, it feels like that those two are happening on both ends of this barbell, imply that there's like just kind of that culture of brewery and all that kind of stuff going on in Oregon as well. I'm not much of a winery guy, but I think that if that's your jam, looks there are those kinds of things in this region of the world too, with all kinds of the appropriate weather for growing grapes or whatever. And I think that that implies it's a really cool deal. I also think for its worth that this is probably, unlike anyone else on Houston's schedule, the only time you get to make that trip. They come to Houston next season. For what it's worth, you don't have them on the schedule in the foreseeable future. And unfortunately for them, it feels like there's a real possibility that they're not a Power 4 team. And I don't know that you're going out of your way to schedule Oregon State as a non-Power 4 team in the distant future. I don't know that Houston's making a bunch of trips to go play football games in Oregon unless they can get like the University of Oregon on the schedule. I just I don't know when the next time you'll have a chance to go see Houston play in the Pacific Northwest is. There aren't bowl games up there. Like you don't get that many chances to go do that, unless I guess Yormark adds some of them to the Big 12 or something. I feel like if you got to go to one game, that's the one you go to, and at the road game, I should say, that you go to, for a lot of reasons. But it's a new part of the country, new part of the world to go see. And who knows when the next time you get to go see it is. If you've got tickets to go see a road game, tell us in the comments down below where you are headed and tell us what you're going to do there. Locked On Cougs is going to be bringing you more on the Houston Cougar football season each and every day. We have a busy week of content as we get into the season this week. So stay tuned, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know that we are live. Locked On Cougs, the prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.